My Hero Academia is incredibly popular right now, but one question we found ourselves asking was, how different is it compared to the manga? Some anime make radical changes to the source material, while others remain completely faithful. So where does My Hero fall on that scale? Well, we made a whole video just for you, detailing all the major changes that happened in the anime compared to the manga. Let's quit dilly-dallying and get into it right now. There's a whole lot of pop culture references in the manga that the anime had difficulty securing the rights to use. Just take a look at one of the first pages of the manga, where narration tells us that a society of superheroes is now possible, thanks to people being born with some truly amazing abilities. During this moment, the manga showcases some shadowy figures, but it isn't hard to make out who these superheroes are. That's, it's clearly Spider-Man, Superman, and Wolverine hanging out in the same panel. There's others who might be recognizable, including a seemingly literal Batman. But it's those first three that really stand out. Of course, the anime couldn't use these heroes when they adapted it, so they cut out that moment altogether. Which is a shame, because it would have been neat to know that these heroes exist in this wacky world. But now the big question is, could All Might beat Superman in a fight? When you think of Bakugo, the first thing that comes to mind is role model student, right? Wrong. Bakugo always seems like he's constantly stepping on Legos with his bare feet, always shouting loud enough to be heard multiple cities over. But despite his anger management issues, Bakugo just wants to be the best hero ever, and he's gonna do whatever it takes to make that a reality. In the beginning of the manga, this means doing whatever it takes to get into UA high school, and not letting anything jeopardize his chances. Unlike the anime, the manga has a scene of Bakugo getting angry with his friends for smoking cigarettes because he's worried that if they get caught, it would affect any recommendation letter he'd get. It further shows how driven he is to get into the Hero Academy. Imagine how hard it must be to write a letter of recommendation for Bakugo. Whenever you have a character thinking about an important decision or remembering something significant, the safe go-to is just to have a flashback to that exact scene in question. A lot of popular anime tend to do this, and My Hero is no exception. Flashbacks also provide a bit more dramatic weight to anything. Just throw in an emotional speech or two, dramatic music, and a flashback to a previous scene, and you got yourself some quality, emotionally manipulative television right there. While My Hero tends to not overindulge in pointless flashbacks, there are a few instances of Deku remembering something we literally just watched in order to raise some dramatic stakes. The best example of this is the second episode, where Deku's speech to All Might in the anime sees us flash back to things we just watched in that episode. Is that in the manga? No. Is it unnecessary? Yeah. But is it emotionally effective? You bet. When a strange man makes you eat some of his hair in order to become a god amongst men, you better do everything that man says. All Might has always been painted in the anime as a mostly kind and understanding mentor to Deku, so it's interesting to see the manga version of the superhero take a slightly more aggressive approach to the way he trains his prodigy. In the anime, when Deku has a hard time training his body to not be so weak, All Might is understanding about it, encouraging Deku to continue fighting. Yeah, that's nice and everything, but we sort of prefer the manga All Might, who seems to get so mad at Deku that he does his signature blood cough. It's basically that Dumbledore "did you put your name in the goblet of fire" scenario all over again, with the emotions of one line being different in literature than it is portrayed on the screen. The reference game in the My Hero Academia manga is strong. In another instance of referencing something the show couldn't get the rights for, the third chapter of the manga had everyone's favorite. President Mike explained the rules for the entry exam into UA high school. To make things easier, he explains it in terms that any young high school student would understand. Super Mario Bros. For Hero's powers, the shadowy figures of Super Mario, Fire Mario, and Tanuki Mario are shown, while the enemies are represented by a Goomba, a Koopa Troopa, Piranha Plant, and of course, a Thwomp. If the references were too retro, as President Mike puts it in the manga, he even name-drops Super Mario Bros. Just in case you didn't get it. It's a funny bit, but again was unfortunately an instance that the anime just couldn't get the approval to use, so they used robots as examples instead. If it wasn't a giveaway by having students fight gigantic rampaging robots to secure a spot at UA, it's obvious that it's a pretty hard place to get into, but some kids are so talented they can skip to the front of the line. In the anime, Deku mentions almost immediately that there are students who got in through recommendation, without having to go through the entry exam like everybody else. Of course, we now know that those students include obvious show MVPs Shoto Todoroki and Momo Yaoyorozu. The manga reveals the whole recommendation thing much later in the story than the anime does, and it's not hard to see why. Shoto and Momo barely factor into this part of the story, so it makes sense that the manga wanted to save that for a later time. But points to the anime for making Shoto and Momo relevant earlier than the manga. Let's be honest, everybody wants Aizawa as their teacher. We'd sign up right now for Quantum Physics 500 if Aizawa was teaching it. He's grown to be one of the most popular characters in the anime, but before he grew to be so likable, he was a potential antagonist to young Deku. And it's interesting to see the anime play up that aspect way more than the manga ever did. Take the quirk apprehension test, for example. The manga clearly states that all students take the test on their very first day, and it's a completely normal thing for every class to go through, but in the anime, it's a little different. The show makes it seem like Aizawa is going rogue and deciding to test the students on his own accord. It's only a slight change, but it goes a long way in portraying the teacher in a completely different light in the anime compared to the manga. Everyone knows that quirks usually come with a downside, like Mineta starting to bleed if he pulls too many purple balls off of his head, which, to be honest, we all sort of cheer for when that happens. But one negative side effect that doesn't get discussed too much is Aoyama's naval laser quirk, which is surprising given how much he loves talking about himself. In one of the biggest quirk-based differences, the anime has him state in Season 1 that he gets a stomachache if he uses his powers for too long. That's a fair trade-off for being able to shoot a death beam from your belly button, but the manga actually suggests a much worse side effect. Instead of a stomachache, Aoyama says that if he uses his power for too long, his stomach would explode. That's a pretty big difference from just having to run to the bathroom if he overuses his powers. We've already discussed how Aizawa is portrayed in a little different light in the anime than in the manga, but the biggest change has to come from the end of the quirk apprehension exam. Before the test, he kindly let everyone know that the person in last place at the end will be expelled. This understandably put a whole lot of pressure on the students, especially Deku, who couldn't control his new quirk just yet. The difference in which the following events unfold is interesting. In the manga, Aizawa tells them, "Psych, no one's actually getting expelled," and then reveals the rankings that show Deku in last place. The anime lets Deku suffer for a little bit longer. In the show, Aizawa shows the rankings first, and Deku sees that he's at the bottom. He freaks out and is relieved when Aizawa reveals the truth. It's another small moment, but it allows us to see a classic Deku freakout. We all know that Deku and Uraraka are endgame. There's no greater ship in the show, but the anime seems to highlight the two young lovebirds a bit more than the manga, and there's a logical reason for this. At the beginning of Season 3, there's a few scenes of Uraraka being awkward around Deku once she realizes she has feelings for him. Cue the beet red face and the awkward, flustered dialogue. Some of these scenes don't have a manga counterpart, but that's because audiences work differently reading the manga and watching the anime. There was a long break between seasons, meaning some of them had to be reminded that this romance exists and is important for the story, something that manga readers never had to worry about as they're just going chapter by chapter. The fun moments are just a little added bonus for Uraraka and Deku fans. The benefit of an anime over a manga is having time to develop characters a little bit more before mercilessly cutting them down. Take a look at Tensei Ida, brother of Tenya Ida, who fights as the superhero Ingenium. Both in the manga and the anime, the hero killer Stain horribly wounds Tensei, forcing Tenya on a path of vengeance. But the anime allows us a little more time with Tensei before he's injured, adding more scenes of his search for Stain that we all know is going to end poorly. You could say it's a little cruel to build a character up more in the anime, knowing you're just going to hurt them soon, but it works in making us more attached to Tensei, and therefore caring more when Stain defeats him. It also allows us to understand Tenya's anger a bit better, as we see what a fascinating hero Ingenium is in the field. The internships that Class 1A went through were a good way for students to experience a bit of the real world, while also focusing on potential future careers as heroes. There isn't a huge difference in how most of these internships are portrayed in the anime versus the manga, but it does show us some things we've never seen before, or reveals things earlier in the anime than it does in the manga. For instance, we see Jira training under Death Arms, who unfortunately doesn't have the power to cause instant death with his hands. but his super strong. Other differences include seeing Mineta training under Mountain Lady. Don't make that dirty, you creeps. As well as seeing Shoto working at his father's workplace earlier. These changes aren't major differences, and it doesn't affect the story all too much, but can we all just agree that unpaid internships stink for almost everybody? In a show that's unafraid to paint Endeavor in a less than endearing light, it's surprising that it went out of its way to show how great of a hero the worst Father of the Year contender can be. We know that he's a powerful hero. Heck, he's number 2 after all. A gigantic number 2, that is. But there aren't many instances where we can see him unleash his power. During the hunt for Stain, that changes. In the manga, Endeavor doesn't have a whole lot to do here, but the anime frames him as a hero. He swoops in while one of the rampaging Nomus is about to kill another pro-hero and saves the day. He's also a smart fighter, as he recognizes the Nomu's regenerative ability and decides to incinerate the monster's head so the cells can't grow back. It's a great moment that almost makes you forget how much you hate the guy. You can imagine the writers of the My Hero Academia anime sitting around the table and saying, "Yeah, but how about Morph Rafi?" That's basically the entire reason for the 19th episode of Season 2, which was the first episode of almost completely anime original content, and saw us mostly follow Frappy as we flash back to her internship where she studied under the humanoid spotted seal hero Selkie. It's not just a quick glimpse either, but a full adventure involving a big old octopus man fight. Sure, we also see Frappy learn what it means to become a hero and grow exponentially as a character, but who needs all that when you got Frog Girl doing battle with Discount Davy Jones? But this obviously didn't have any manga relation due to its random placement in the season. The episode proved that they could pump out quick, quality stories without being entirely dependent on the manga. While watching the practical exam arc in the anime, did you find yourself wondering how the heck All Might is staying in his hero form this whole time? Or was that just us? It was probably just us. Maybe we're just nitpicking, but it's a little odd knowing that All Might can only stay All Might for a certain amount of time, yet he seems to be in hero form throughout the entirety of this exam. And wouldn't you know it, the manga actually has an explanation for this. In the anime, the students all watch one another as every pair takes on a hero. It's a great way for the students to evaluate and comment on what's happening. But in the manga, everyone's test happens simultaneously, meaning no one can watch each other and provide helpful audience commentary or snide remarks. Differences like these help out in situations when we can't hear what a character is thinking. What great anime would be complete without a mandatory swimsuit episode? It's a staple in all the great anime. Remember that time Goku and Piccolo were nervous about showing off their swimsuit buds to their friends? Remember when the Elric brothers took a break from obsessing about their dead mother and mutilated bodies to soak up some sun on the beach? Alright, maybe those don't happen, but we can at least say My Hero had a swimsuit episode. Instead of jumping straight into the action, the first episode of Season 3 had the students take a small break before being whisked away to the summer training camp. And they all decide to go to the pool. Classic pool shenanigans ensue, and out of everything, you can bet Mineta was creepy during all of it. This episode didn't advance the plot at all, but was a fun way to see our favorite characters in a different environment. Really, the biggest thing we should be thankful for in the show is the ability to flesh out fight scenes in a way the manga didn't have the opportunity to do. Take a look at the second episode of Season 3 when they fight the Earth Beast that Pixie Bob creates to test the students during their training camp. In the manga, we just get to see our A-team of Deku, Shoto, Bakugo, and Tenya fight one of these monsters. But the anime allows the rest of the students to have fun too. We see awesome uses of skills like Kaminari shocking a monster before going dumb, Koda summoning the birds of the forest to attack, and even Mineta giving some good attacks with his purple sticky balls. It's a great showcase for Class 1A and allows for some of the lesser featured characters to have their moment to shine and kick major butt. Throughout the anime, we've been treated to some insane moments that make us feel like our hearts are going to burst right out of our chests. Perhaps the greatest adrenaline-inducing moment comes from Bakugo's rescue from All For One. Let's set the stage. Bakugo is trapped behind enemy lines, and while All Might and All For One are locked in battle, Deku, Ida, and Kirishima enact a plan to save him. What happens next is just incredible, as Bakugo launches himself like a rocket into the air and the students catch him while he flies. Epic, right? Well, in the manga, this event isn't as exaggerated, with Bakugo only launching himself a little bit over the battlefield as opposed to seemingly a full mile away. We all agree the anime version is better, but it begs the question, why was Bakugo so worried about not being able to escape when he could just explode himself to the next area code? The Provisional Hero License exam was a way for students to attempt to get their Provisional Hero licenses, so they could legally beat up bad guys. A necessity for most of these kids, but the exam is portrayed slightly differently in the manga than the anime. Once again, the anime goes above and beyond by fleshing out other students' experiences. For example, everyone's favorite Walk and Icy Hot advertisement Shoto gets a cool face-off with rival school Seiken instead of facing a bunch of unknown students off-screen like in the manga. The biggest improvement is Momo's team, who gets to fight against the apparently all-female Seiyai Academy. This group of women don't appear in the manga, which is a shame because a few of them have some awesome quirks, like Psycho, who gets an extremely high IQ after she drinks tea? Who gets paid to come up with these quirks? At the end of Season 3, we're introduced to a trio of amazing students called the Big Three. The most impressive of the bunch is Mirio, who decides the best way to show everyone the level they should strive for is by beating the crap out of them. He's a very hands-on type of teacher. With his complete mastery of his permeation skill, Mirio proves a more than capable force against our bewildered heroes. In the anime, we see him use tactics to wipe out the long-range fighters first. A really smart move. But the manga makes that even more impressive, as he not only takes out a huge chunk of fighters all at once, but he does it in about 5 seconds, with an added timer at the bottom. It shows just how amazing he is, and it adds to the fact that these students are just completely out of his league. And that's our list of the biggest differences between the manga and anime of My Hero Academia. Are there any we missed? Do you think the manga or the show is better? Be sure to leave a comment below with your thoughts, and of course, go ahead and subscribe to CBR for more awesome content just like this. Thanks for watching!